Well, 2 weeks ago, we looked at the incredible story of the birth of Samson. You'll notice tonight we're looking at the rest of the life of Samson, not Samson. Oh, anyway, from the text, it is clearly evident that the hand of the Lord was involved in the birth of Samson. I mean, an angel announces to Manoah and his wife, though they had been barren up to that point in time, that they would have a son. And that the son would be special, and that he would be a Nazirite from birth until death. In fact, perhaps even before his birth, because of the no fruit of the vine and so forth, that his mother was told, not to consume any of it until he was born. So he would be a Nazirite. They trusted the angel, and Samson was born. Now, back when we had TV in my house, which we gave it up several months ago, and I don't think I've actually missed it. I don't know. But you didn't watch the Razorbacks? No, I didn't watch the Razorbacks. So sorry about that. Anyway, but back when we had TV, I would often waste an awful lot of time just watching TV. And I would watch sports that came on, and just about anything that was on sport related, I'd watch it. And one of those things that was somewhat interesting, but I was kind of like, really? Was what's known as the world's strongest man competitions. And they did some pretty unusual things, like they had telephone poles, and they had to see how far they could throw them and flip them over and everything. And actually, I think it's actually a thing in Scotland where they do that and everything for real. But anyhow, so watch that, and then they would pull 18-wheelers. Just a man pulling an 18-wheeler, or I think one year they even did a 747 airplane that he was pulling, and I'm kind of like, that's just not normal, okay? But anyway, I enjoyed watching it and all. But Samson would have put them all to shame. Samson was probably the strongest man who ever lived. He was a man of incredible strength. In fact, from our text, which is Judges chapters 14 through 16, if you want to turn there, we're going to see that he is able to kill a lion with his bare hands. That he kills 30 Philistines, that he's able to catch 300 foxes and tie their tails together and put a torch between their tails and send them loose with lit torches. That he's able to kill 1,000 more Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. That he breaks off and carries the city gate of a city, iron bars and all, up a hill. And that he destroys an entire temple with his bare hands. Those are some pretty impressive feats of strength. But of course, Samson's strength wasn't necessarily his own. It was the spirit and the power of the Lord that came upon him that allowed him to do all of those impressive feats of strength. But, as is often the case, the true test of a man's strength is that God-given blessing, woman. Yep. And Samson, well, he may have had physical strength, but when it came to women, he didn't know. He was way out of his league, okay? That's all there is. That's all we can say about that. No matter how strong a man is physically, all it takes is a pretty woman to make him crumble. That was Samson's biggest weakness. That was his Achilles heel, so to speak. He had 3 relationships with women that we are told about. And actually, what I want us to do tonight is to divide the rest of his life, chapters 14 through 16 of Judges, into those 3 relationships with women. And so we begin with Samson's first marriage. Perhaps it was his only marriage. It's the only woman that we're told he actually married or tried to marry, I guess I should say. And we'll call her affectionately woman number 1. from Judges chapters 14 and 15. We begin, of course, as most marriages do, with the courting, the courtship that was involved in it. He is out somewhere and he sees the woman. And he likes what he sees in the woman. She is a Philistine, though. And that's kind of sort of a problem for him, or actually it should be a problem for him, but it's not a problem for him. He doesn't care if she's a Philistine. So he goes home and he has that talk with his mom and dad that no mom and dad ever want to have with their son or daughter. He says, Mom and Dad, I met this girl and she's really great and I really like her and I want you to get her for me for my wife. Oh, and by the way, she's a Philistine. Now, the parents initially object because she is a Philistine. I mean, they may not be the sharpest knives in the drawer, but they know that the Philistines are oppressing the Israelites, and that no self-respecting Israelite should want to have anything to do with a Philistine. They know perhaps that in Deuteronomy 7 verse 3, God has said that He didn't want the Israelites to intermarry with the other nations and so forth. See, the problem was, they didn't understand that the hand of God was involved in this. That God was going to use this as an occasion for Samson to confront the Philistines about their oppression of Israel. Samson insists, though, and so the parents give in. And they go with him to Timnah. And on the road to Timnah, something very exciting happens. If you look at Judges 14, verses 5 and 6. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So a lion attacks Samson, who was traveling again with his parents. And then, actually, Samson attacks the lion. And he tears the lion to pieces like one tears a young goat. I don't know, how does one tear a young goat? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the farm life and everything, I guess. But you know, that tearing a goat, that'd be pretty impressive. But this is a lion that he tears. And then he doesn't tell his parents. Part of the Nazirite vow, remember, that he was a Nazirite from birth till death, was he could not have any contact with death. And yet he kills the lion with his bare hand. And something else that I've always questioned in here, if his parents were traveling with him, how did he not tell them about the lion? I mean, was he just a young man in love so much that he was just way ahead of his parents as they were traveling? Or were they way ahead of him? Was he saying, am I really going to get married? Oh, no. And just walking real slow? Or you know, did the lion attack and then they fought him off and Samson's parents went on ahead or got out of the way or got to where they would no longer be in harm's way? I don't know. But somehow he kept it from his parents. They go to Timnah. Samson likes the girl. She likes Samson. And when boy meets girl, likes girl. Girl meets boy, likes boy. Of course, we come to the wedding. Verses 8 through 20 of chapter 14. Now he returns home. I don't know, maybe his parents stay in Timnah to help with the planning and everything. He goes back home, and then on the way back, he sees the lion's carcass, and some bees have built a hive in the carcass. And, well, naturally, when bees build a hive, what's in that hive? Honey. And so he gets some honey from the bees and everything. Okay. If killing the lion didn't violate the Nazirite vow? I mean, because he could have said, well, it was self-defense. The lion attacked him, and so he just was defending himself, and there could be an excuse for it, perhaps. But if that didn't violate the Nazirite vow, certainly this did. Because what did he have to do in order to get to the hive? He had to touch the dead lion. So obviously he has now had contact with death at least twice. And he takes some of the honey and he gives it to his parents, but he doesn't tell them the source of it. He doesn't tell them where he got it. We need to know a little bit about the wedding party as well. Because Samson gets to Timnah, where his fiancée is, and he is given 30 companions by the Philistines. And one of these 30 gets to be elected best man. And he doesn't even get to choose his own attendants for his wedding, but he doesn't care. He is so in love with this girl and all. And so anyway, the wedding feast lasted for 7 days. Now, Samson, again, he's never seen these 30 people before, so he decides he's going to have a little bit of fun and maybe turn a tidy little profit in the process. So he gives them a riddle. Now, about the riddle, you need to know the stakes, first of all. He says, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you a riddle, and if you solve it, then I'll give each of you a set of clothes, undergarment and an outer garment, linen garment and set of clothes. But if you don't, then each of you has to give me the same thing. And they're agreeable to this. So what's the riddle? Look at verse 14 of chapter 14. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And he says, okay, now what does it mean? And they're stumped. So stumped, in fact, that leads to what we might call some plowing. 3 days, they have no clue. And I imagine Samson's feeling pretty confident. I mean, he's not going to have to do laundry except once a month. He's got 30 sets of clothes coming his way. This is great, right? And so Samson's pretty confident. But on the 4th day, these 30 guys go to his wife. And they say, did you invite us here to steal from us, to rob us? You find out what the answer is and then tell us. And so the woman, because she doesn't want to be guilty of, insulting her guests or whatever, so she goes to Samson. And she says, you don't really love me. You gave him this riddle and don't even tell me what it is, and you don't love me. And Samson says, I haven't even told my parents about it. Why would I tell you about it? I love my parents, I love you. What's the point? Let's just enjoy this thing. But anyway, she keeps on asking until the 7th day. Finally, Samson says, okay, fine. He tells her the answer. She tells them the answer. Verse 14, or verse 18, excuse me. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And that's when verse 19 comes up, and the last part of verse 18, he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. All right, ladies, how would you like for this guy that is supposed to be your brand new husband to call you a heifer? Okay? Anyway, it's painfully obvious that Samson's just a little bit upset, okay? So anyway, he fulfills the deal. Verse 19 tells us, even if you're not going to be honest about it, if you're going to cheat, I'm going to be honest and everything. So what does he do? He goes out and he kills 30 Philistines and takes their clothes and gives them to his attendants. Which I'm not exactly thinking that's what the attendants thought was going to happen. But, it takes 30 Philistines off of the roll, we might say. And in the aftermath, in his hot anger, Samson returns home. Now, apparently he doesn't take his new wife with him when he returns home, because in order to save face, his would-be father-in-law gives his would-be wife to the best man to be his wife. All right. This is the beginnings of a dysfunctional family, okay? Anyway, so the would-be wife is now the wife of the best man that Samson's known for exactly a week. Well, anyway, that brings us to the revenge. Some days later, Samson remembers, oh yeah, I kind of got married. So he says, I think I'll go visit my wife. And when he gets to her house, to her father's house, he won't let her, or he won't let him go in to see her. And Samson starts to get a little upset, and he says, hey, just the way that you were acting, I thought you were so fed up with it, you were so mad that you would never come back, and so I gave her to the best man. But look at her younger sister over here. She's a lot better looking anyhow. Okay, dads, that's not the way you do things, okay? That's just not. But anyway, so Samson, though, is kind of still a little bit perturbed by that. So that brings about the foxes. Now, I know we've been talking about women and stuff. We're not talking about women when we say foxes, okay? These are actual foxes. He catches 300 actual foxes. That's an impressive feat, right? Okay, he catches 300 of them. He ties them tail to tail with a torch in the middle. And then he lights the torches and sets the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. Bye-bye harvest. And that's exactly what happens. Needless to say, the Philistines weren't real thrilled with this. And so they need to get some revenge, and so we have the slaughter. The Philistines find out that it was Samson who destroyed their grain. So they have a really unique system of getting even. They go to his would-be but is not wife and her father and burn them. Okay, the woman was given to another person. That doesn't matter to them. They take it out on them as well. And again, they know it's Samson, and so they find out that Samson has been hiding or living with the men of Judah. And so they go to the men of Judah and they say, we're going to totally wipe you off the face of the earth if you don't give us Samson. So Samson allows himself to be handed over to them. Well, let's take a look at chapter 15, verses 14 through 17. He's been tied by ropes and all. And so they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. Verse 13 tells us, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it. And with it he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey I have struck down 1,000 men. As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramah Lehi. So, he has some more contact with death. He takes the jawbone of a donkey. we can reasonably and safely assume the donkey was no longer attached to the jawbone. So the donkey had to have been dead. Thus the jawbone came from a dead animal. And he kills 1,000 men with it. And so he has contact with death there as well. Needless to say, Samson's career with women has not started out very well. Well, that brings us to woman number 2. Now, a lot was said about woman number 1, 2 whole chapters. Exactly 3 verses is given to woman number 2. But what we know about woman number 2 from chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, she's a prostitute from Gaza in Philistia. The people learn where Samson is. She's a Philistine. Maybe they learn where Samson is because she's helping them a little bit. Maybe they know that, all she's got to do is bat her little eyes and Samson's going to turn to jelly. And so, whether it's with her help or without her help, they find out where she is, where he is, and they surround the house. They decide they're going to wait until morning, though, to attack so that they have a little bit of daylight, I guess. Well, Samson gets up at midnight and he sneaks away from the house. Now, if you are in a house and you know there are people surrounding the house whose intent it is to capture and or kill you when in the morning, and you successfully sneak away from the house, maybe it's just me, but I would try to get out of town as quietly and quickly as possible. That may just be me, though. Samson gets away from the house, and he is going to leave town, but he's not going to exactly do it quietly, because he picks up the gate of the city. Iron bars and all. This isn't a gate like you have out in front of your house with the swinging picket fence type of thing. No. This is a huge gate held in place by bars of iron in rock and so forth. And so he lifts this up and he carries it up a hill facing Hebron, which was the chief city of Judah, about 40 miles away. And he leaves it there. Now, maybe that's a message to the people of Judah, because remember, it was the people of Judah who were so willing to turn him over to the Philistines in chapter 15, verses 11 through 14. Well, that's pretty much all we hear about woman number 2. 3 verses, like I said. Woman number 3 is perhaps the most famous of Samson's girlfriends, Delilah. 2 things you need to know about Delilah. Number 1, Delilah could be bought. She could be bought, okay? I mean, they had tried threats with the first woman, didn't quite work out. They had tried maybe plotting with woman number 2, but it didn't work out. So for woman number 3, they bribe her. What's the bribe? They promise her 1,100 pieces of silver from each of the rulers of the Philistines. Now, there were 5 rulers of the Philistines, Joshua 13 verse 3 tells us. And some versions don't have pieces of silver, but have shekels of silver. Roughly speaking, we're talking about 28 pounds of silver from each of the 5 rulers of the Philistines. Now, on Friday, silver closed. This varies by source and market, I guess, and something. But on Friday, silver closed at roughly $14.77 per ounce. Okay, $14.77. I'm sorry if that ruins some of your night because your portfolio is going anyway. But if you've invested in silver, okay. Anyway, there are 16 ounces in a pound. Okay, so if you take 16 ounces per pound, 14.77 per ounce, 28 pounds, it comes to $6,616.96 per ruler of the Philistines. Again, there were 5 rulers. So you multiply that by 5, and you come up with a grand total of $33,089.80. Delilah could be bought, but not very cheaply, okay? I don't know, maybe they figured they tried everything else, that they weren't going to skimp this time. So she could be bought. Something else you need to know about Delilah, she could be fooled. She could be fooled. Look at verse 6 of chapter 16. Okay, she's accepted their offer. So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound that one could subdue you." Okay, guys, non-married guys, think about this. All 2 of you that are here. No, there's 3. Okay. Anyway, if a girl says, "Tell me how you can be made weak," you probably don't want to hang out with the girl much longer, okay? Samson's not smart enough to know this, okay? So anyway, she says, "Tell me where your great strength lies and how you can be bound and how that someone could subdue you." So I said, okay, I mean, maybe he's going to have some fun with her, okay? So he says, if you tie me with 7 fresh thongs or bowstrings, depending on the version. Now here's the kicker. She puts him to sleep and ties him with 7 fresh bowstrings. And then, lo and behold, the Philistines show up. "Samson, the Philistines are here." He stands up, breaks the bowstrings, and defends himself, and all is well. So Delilah goes back to her. Verse 10, "Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound." So he says, "If you bind me with new ropes that have never been used before, then I'll be just as weak as any other man." Lo and behold, Delilah puts him to sleep, ties him with new ropes, and there's the Philistines again. Isn't that amazing? Wow. Okay, so Samson, the Philistines are with you. He snaps the ropes, defends himself. Then we come to verses 13 and 14. Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound." And he said to her, "If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with the pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." He's getting kind of close to the truth here, isn't he? But it's still just a game to him, because he knows that he's going to be fine. And so when, lo and behold, the Philistines are here, he pulls the pin out, lets his hair go, and everything, and he defends himself just like he had before. Then we come to verses 15 through 17. And she said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me?" Okay, guys, you know what's coming, don't you? Yeah. "You've mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies." And when she pressed him hard with her words, day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, and he said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I've been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." You know, It's amazing to me that Delilah would keep trying the things that he said, because he's made a fool out of her 3 times. Even more amazing to me is that Samson wouldn't catch on to what's happening here. I mean, he was all brawn and no brain. All right? So anyway, guys, you tell a girl, don't do something, and she does it, she's trying to hurt you, okay? Get away from her. Anyway, that's the preacher's dating advice for tonight. Look at verses 18 through 20. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up again, for he has told me all his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought her the money in their hands. She made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Did you catch that last part? He did not know the Lord had left him. I suppose that it is significant that when the Philistines do capture Samson, they put out both of his eyes. You look at verse 21, it tells us that. Now I know they did that to all of their prisoners. Okay, I understand that. But when you think about it, Samson's eyes were really what caused him the most problems. I mean, he was a sucker for a pretty face. Now, some people don't think that Jesus was being quite as serious as maybe he was in Matthew chapter 5, verse 29, where it says, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell." People say, well, he doesn't really mean that. I think what Jesus means is, if you find yourself being tempted to sin and that temptation is great and you find yourself falling a lot, do whatever it takes to make sure that you don't sin. I guess literally speaking, that's exactly what happened to Samson. The source of his temptation was taken away from him. In Judges 16, verses 23 through 31, we read about the death of Samson. The Philistines have captured him. They've put him to work, and they're really happy. Their God has delivered their enemy into their hands. And so they want to ridicule the once mighty Samson. And so they bring him out, and he's being led by a young man. And he asked the young man who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests." Those supporting pillars, the main pillars, okay? And so the boy puts him there. And Samson, while they're laughing at him and making fun of him and ridiculing him, Samson prays. And it seems like his prayer is fairly simple. "Oh Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged upon the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then what he does is amazing. And Samson, verse 29, grasps the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. Then his brothers came and buried him. He had judged Israel for 20 years. He prays, "God, let me have that strength one more time," and God gives it to him. I think Samson's death is kind of sort of comparable to Jesus' death. Because, see, more was accomplished through Samson's death toward the liberation of Israel from the Philistines than in his entire lifetime. Likewise, more was accomplished in Jesus' death toward the liberation of all of mankind from sin than in all of history. Samson's a great example. He's a great example of maybe of what not to do. He had all of this strength, all of this power, all of this ability, and yet he chose to use it in not so good ways. God has given each of us abilities. It may not be great strength. You might not be able to tear a lion as you were if you were tearing a young goat. You may not even be able to tear a young goat. I don't know. But God's given you the abilities to do something. He's put you in places where you can have an impact and an effect on people. Are you having His desired impact and effect? Are you fulfilling that purpose that God has set for you in your life? If not, you need to start. Maybe that means you need to start living for God tonight by being immersed in the waters of baptism for the forgiveness of your sins. Maybe it means you need to pray where you're at, asking God to help you be better at accomplishing His purpose for your life. But maybe you need to respond publicly, asking the church here to pray with you and to pray for you so that you can start accomplishing God's purpose for your life. Whatever that need is, don't leave here with that need. If it involves a public response, then won't you come to the front now as we stand and sing together.